and welcome to one of those Ben's Junk videos that only true aficionados will really appreciate. As in, I'm going to have to get a bit esoteric this time, even more so than usual, and yes, this is a failsafe. So anyway, before I even get into this, here's what I was going to do this week. Over the summer, I visited Denver, and while I was there at a thrift store, I found this funky old DVR intended for surveillance use. And as I found upon plugging it in, it still had the hard drive in it. And so, yeah, I figured, okay, I'm going to see if there's anything on here. And sure enough, there was. The thing was full. And I would try and open a file and the machine would just crash. Just to get to the folder, the whole thing would crash. And it wasn't a security thing, just something failed somewhere down the line. But I pulled that hard drive and I had the means of plugging it into a computer, and sure enough, there's this big list of files from 2015 or so, and they're encrypted. I can't seem to access them. And yeah, my whole video just imploded. So yes, here we are getting good and esoteric with a couple of Blackhawk film digests. They're film catalogs here. I've done one of these before late last year. That was on the holiday 1980 edition, we'll say. Late 80 going into early 81. I did that one as kind of a means of easing us into the holidays last year. But this time we're going to jump forward to 1982, and I've actually got two of these to look at, and we're going to do them in reverse order. So we're going to start in the fall of 82, and we'll end in the spring of 82. So anyway, on that first one I did, of course, Blackhawk was known as a film distributor of mostly very old, usually silent, public domain movies. But fast forward to 1980, they were starting to move into videotape as opposed to film prints of things. And at the same time, they were trying to become just an all-around mail-order store. They did even open an actual brick-and-mortar store in Davenport, Iowa, of all places. That's because that's where they were based. That only lasted a couple of years, and Blackhawk, closed for good around 87 or 8, I think. But anyway, yeah, I've never been able to do an episode on Blackhawk due to lack of material. But it hasn't stopped me from going down as many rabbit holes as I can with it. And this is another one here. So, of course, this being late 82 here, we are truly moving entirely into video territory here. As far as film prints go, there's some, but it feels like they're really trying to phase them out at this point, even when they try and plug a new one. But anyway, right on the front cover here is a reissue of two of Blackhawk's genuine staples, a couple of D.W. Griffith shorts. Of course, Griffith became the first really famous movie director, responsible for this, at this point, little kind of infamous thing called Birth of a Nation, but also Intolerance, Broken Blossoms, Way Down East, Orphans of the Storm, for films that maybe about 10 people in the world would ever appreciate today. So anyway, yeah, they were also reissuing some of his old pre-feature short films, and these had been kicking around Blackhawk's catalog since the 50s. But yeah, we got The Battle at Elderbush Gulch, and boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Paired with The Musketeers of Pig Alley. And I should note at this point, I actually do have 8mm prints from Blackhawk of both of those shorts, and they are sitting in the bottom of the box in the back of my storage right now, and it would just take me quite a while to fish them out. But yeah. Nonetheless, right here in this very room, I did have, just by sheer coinkydink, a later VHS issue, but this is from Kino Video. This is after Blackhawk in its original incarnation folded, and this is now about half of Griffith's shorts, and then Kino had another tape where it was the other half of Griffith's short films. And these have all been on DVD at this point. I have these on DVD, but I've kept this in here just kind of with some of my old tapes, the ones that I used to really treasure in my teens and such, that for whatever reason I just don't seem to want to go into storage. They live just out of the shot. I've got my TV and the 4K player and the streaming box and a VHS deck in there, and then a couple little drawers full of movies, and yeah, this is still lurking in there. But anyway, yeah, as far as my own battle at Elderbush Gulch goes, it's about as close to famous as a tune as I've ever had, kind of, maybe sort of behind Pavand, the archive theme. But it's been kind of a long-running joke, is it the battle at or the battle of? And, well, we're no clearer here. It's the battle of on the front and the battle at on the back. But anyway, if I pull this up here, for one, it's just a mere $50 for your beta or VHS copy of this in $1982. But here's one of the little rabbit holes I've gone down with Blackhawk films. Right at the tip of my thumb, there's that letter S. And as it turns out, Blackhawk was doing something that I was blissfully unaware of. And speaking of blissfully unaware, I never knew that there was a tape out there of these two shorts together, and I tried to find it. I couldn't find it anywhere online or even acknowledgement of it anywhere. All right, regarding the whole S thing, let's see if I can do this without destroying this old newsprint here. But right at the tip of my thumb, there's a little blurb there with the letter S at the beginning. And that is that Blackhawk was offering for a little bit of an upcharge the ability to do an on-demand copy of one of their own titles on either X1 Speed Betamax, so the original full-speed beta. So that would make it one of the very, very few pre-recorded beta titles to get a full-speed release. Or even 3/4-inch U-matic tape, so getting up into broadcast formats there. And I'm sure they were licensing some of this stuff for broadcast as well. But yeah, I had no idea that they were doing that sort of thing. But anyway, here's the sci-fi/suspense section, bunch of S's, and Lon Chaney there, Phantom of the Opera. Although they messed up. I don't know if my camera's going to pick that up, but right above the big sleep, it's Phantom of the Opera. But anyway, yeah, this is Blackhawk's little catch-all for not just sci-fi and suspense, but also horror. So it's a bit of a mishmash of titles here. But of course, they were trying to be a full-tilt retail outlet for, just whatever videotapes, major studio tapes as well, not just their own stuff. So yeah, you can get Alien or Amityville Horror by this point, and of course plenty of classics. But anyway, if I go up a page here, well, we got more Lon Chaney. But also, again, anything that Blackhawk was putting out, which is noted by this little kind of medallion-looking thing, yeah, for an upcharge, you could get it in a much fancier manner. And yes, I did start, when I first saw that, I started a running Fleabase search for any of those X1 speed betas or U-matics, because there is so little pre-recorded stuff in either of those formats. And shock of shocks, I have yet to see one anywhere at any price, be it on Fleabase or just out and about. Not that I expect to see Blackhawk anything in the wild in South Dakota. I think we've all heard kind of old jokes about the main video format wars, the first true one, Betamax versus VHS, in that people picked the wrong horse in that race, as in they picked Betamax. Just on the commercial level. Well, in this case, there was another little format war going on in the early 80s, and that would have been the first true video disc war, Laserdisc versus CED, capacitance electronic disc. And, Blackhawk did choose a side in it, and it's CED. So they picked the losing one on that. But I suppose that it must have just been more cost, because If you look at the price of those CEDs next to videotapes, I mean, those things were just dirt cheap by comparison, which they were. I think a lot of people forget that even budget line tapes in the early 80s were still 40 bucks or so, but most like CED video discs retailed for $19.99. Or maybe a little more if it had to be a multi-disc set. So there's a Superman down there, the original feature Superman, you know, Christopher Reeve. That had to be a 2-disc set. Well, we got the Western thing going here if you're into the old cowboy stuff, and it looks like every one of these has the ribbon, which would be about right. Blackhawk was kind of known for doing those things that more mainstream audiences weren't truly into here. They do have some more mainstream, as far as Westerns go, mainstream ones like Butch Cassidy and whatever else. And here the Alamo is up there from the 50s, Fighting Kentuckian with John Wayne, and so on and so forth. Well, here's one that I might actually have to try and look for. So we're in the history section here, and I did actually find one bit of then contemporary history that Blackhawk was actually producing their own thing on, seemingly, or at least licensing it. But yeah, a little documentary about Mount St. Helens when that erupted back in 1980. So that's one that I probably should be looking for. Otherwise, one of the first Georges Méliès compilations, and those just keep getting better and better. It seems like, oh, this is going to be it, you know, if you follow those things. A Trip to the Moon being the most famous of them. And it just seems like every few years somebody finds a better copy, or the technology gets a little better, the restoration gets a little better, and yeah, it just keeps going on and on. So watch, I've probably just cursed it by saying anything. Now, I have read and reread this whole thing about the history of the motion picture, which is a little thing that Paul Killiam, who I've discussed on Archive kind of here and there, put together, trying to put together a bit of a film history lesson. But what they were doing, if I'm reading this right, because this just makes no sense to me, but they, in a lot of cases, were putting out condensed versions. If you look at the last sentence of a lot of these listings, condensed versions of whatever movie that you could already get on Blackhawk Films in its entirety, and you'd be paying the same $49.95 for it regardless. So yeah, either this is a misprint or they were doing something just very, very strange. Maybe that's another problem they had, who knows. Now, for whatever crazy reason, even though Blackhawk had started selling a decent amount of electronics by this point, there is only a partial electronics section to this particular catalog. But the one that jumps out to me, I was mentioning them, you know, betting on the wrong horse as far as video discs go. You could buy yourself a replacement cartridge, the needle for your CED player, and it's only for one particular model though, and it just so happens to be the model that they actually sold, which you will not see in this particular catalog. But otherwise, yeah, you got your standard blank tapes and a bulk eraser if you needed one, keep cases, plastic covers. I don't know if I'd be using a foam anything to clean a VCR out with, but whatever. Anyway, if I kick over to this other side here, boy, this is hitting a nerve with me. Right here at my thumb, we've got the Elmo 912. Now, I put out a video very recently, and just a very quick one, I didn't even assign it an episode number or anything, on my ongoing attempts at fixing up the Elmo 912S, the sound version of that thing. And yeah, mine apparently took a tumble at some point, and it's been me just kind of rebuilding it. But I may just have to break down and get one of these regular silent ones, although you can get a sound monitor for it. But yeah, I'm sure I'd have to try and rig up some sort of sound for it. But yes, even these plain 912s here, if you wanted it with the accessories, was $200 back then. So not cheap stuff at all. Anyway, this has been on the Ben's Junk hunt list for a while, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. But the Supervision, and yes, that's a picture of it just above the blurb. But anyway, yeah, it's a magnifying glass with just an arm and on a base. And yes, it's designed to just be placed in front of the lens of your film projector to try and blow up the picture a bit more, 8mm Super 8. The image size, you can't make it too big. You can't pull too far back from the wall or your screen or whatever before it really starts to get hard to see. But yeah, I just find it amusing that someone was charging $200 for a magnifying glass on a stand. Now, of course, I do have a running Fleabase search for it, or I did. I stopped it actually fairly recently because all I was getting, as one might expect these days, is a bunch of listings for cheap Chinese eyeglasses. Otherwise, before I move on here, here's another one I've kicked around for a Ben's Junk. So sound stripers. So you could add a magnetic sound strip to a film, 8mm Super 8mm film. And I do have a projector that can record, that you can record on, but I've never had the balls to use one of these sound stripers and be able to add my own commentary or music to some existing film. I guess I'm just afraid of destroying it or something. I mean, there's some that are, fairly plentiful out there, but yeah, I just never quite worked up the nerve to try and do that one. Well, here you go, a whole listing of projector lamps. And I wouldn't call those prices too terrible, but I am surprised at the ones you could still get DNE and some of these things, EFP. I mean, some of these, we're talking about these old glass ones, like at the tip of my thumb there. I didn't think they were even making those things anymore by '82. I don't think there had been a projector since the 60s that had anything like that, but these could very well have been, some of these at least, could very well have been new old stock. And I may have inadvertently named one of the halogen ones, which you can actually, even now, as am I making this, you can still get a fair amount of those halogen ones because they still use them in things like dentist's lights and stuff, the thing that they shine over your mouth when they're working on you. Otherwise, the good old days when you could buy empty film reels and cans nice and readily. So here's something that I had no idea was still going on by 1982, but yeah, we're going to get into a big long list of closeout films here. But Ken Films, to me that's a relic of the 50s and 60s here, but yeah, they're closing out their digest prints, 200 and 400 foot digest prints of various movies, and a lot of schlocky horror ones like well, if you watch my own live streams, I noticed Screaming Skull was one of them somewhere on here, right there. But yeah, they got those down to $18.66, and then some of these bigger ones they got at $35.66, and these are just a bit more mainstream. But yeah, digest prints of like The Towering Inferno, although you could buy 3 of those, I suppose. Kind of build up the movie. French Connections on there, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And some of these movies were still reasonably recent as of 1982. I mean, I'm definitely seeing some mid and late 70s titles in there. And a few older ones. African Queen, obviously, is early 50s. Yeah, Alien from 79. Well, it only took us until page 54, but we finally hit the actual Blackhawk film catalog, or at least what was left of it by 1982, late 82. So it's 3 pages worth? Not a whole lot, and it is what you would expect out of them. It's their old standbys by this point. Laurel and Hardy, Little Rascals, so they're down to just one W.C. Fields here. Yes, they do have some of the D Company cartoons, stuff from their own catalog, kind of more low-budget cartoons lurking in there. But yeah, they were still doing them, and where the 16mm prints were still available, yeah, you're talking between 125 and 250 bucks for the most part. Actually, you can scratch those prices I mentioned for 16. You're pushing $1,000 for a print of Birth of a Nation if you wanted one. But even just highlights from the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera is north of 200 here. Let's see, digest prints from Star Wars. But, boy, they do have some interesting ones, don't they? All right, here's Columbia Pictures closing out their films. And some of these are just cheap. We're talking as low as $3.88 here. And some of these, I did not cross these out. That's not somebody's pen. This was done before when it went to press is probably a better way to put it. But yeah, if we go deeper into this, they got a massive, massive list of things they were closing out here. But yeah, that price goes up $8, $9, but still nothing too serious here. All right, well, I'll just regurgitate this one again. One thing I've really been looking for with Blackhawk has been these soundtrack cassettes that you could run to try and sync up at least with your 8mm or Super 8mm prints of Buster Keaton's 1 Week or Laurel and Hardy's 2 Tars. I have not seen anything. And I have started doing things like searching for prints, Blackhawk prints of those 2 movies and just kind of hoping that somebody includes the tape. They just might not list it, but you'd see it on the Fleabay listing. But yeah, it just it has not happened. But yeah, have a little shoebox cassette recorder to play it on, I guess. Also, you could get yourself a cassette of the classic 1938 War of the Worlds. Or if you really dug Fibber, McGee, and Molly, well, they seem to have a whole bunch of only 1941 episodes of that show. And we've come to the back, and I've done Blackhawk slides before on various Ben's Junk episodes, like when I do a slide projector. But they were still running my personal favorite set. I need to find more of these intermission slides. I never have. But I've run most, if not all, the slides from Please Don't Spit on the Floor on one of my slide projector videos. Yeah, those were down to $5, $6 for the most part by this point. Yeah, the automated Fleabay search is still going on for those. All right, as a little bonus here, I've got this little supplement. And yeah, we're jumping back to the spring of '82 for this one. And I do not have supplement 1 or the main magazine as implied. I use the term generically. And yes, I think we can safely say that phone number is no good at this point. But anyway, yeah, we'll just take a quick cruise through here. But I did notice they were kind of trying to post some updates in here. So just kind of little happenings going on at Blackhawk. And indeed, in their own little way, I suppose you could try and pause and read this thing about film lab changes. It seems like it's their way of saying that we're done with this stuff. We're phasing this out. Indeed, here they even admit with 16mm film that you could be looking at a 1-year wait for your print. So not necessarily an efficient way of doing things, is it? Well, we always got to check out the specials, don't we? So got a few titles that are half off here, 3 to be exact, and I admit I am totally unfamiliar with 2 out of the 3, so I'm not familiar with the Old Soldier or Station West, but I'm definitely familiar with the Chaplin Mutuals, so the shorts that Chaplin did for the Mutual Studios. I think this would have been 1916 to 18 thereabouts, and it even lists right here next to the picture of Chaplin which ones they were. But I can't say I've ever seen that one anywhere. But anyway, yeah, those prices are terrific, actually. I mean, like for the Chaplin stuff, $24.99 in 1982 was a pretty dang good deal. This is, yeah, still kind of the period where even budget line tapes were 30, 40 bucks. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think we missed the sale, though. It ended back on June 30th of 1982. All right, we were looking at some pretty dang pricey 16 millimeter prints in that last magazine, but we got some overstocks here, and the prices, I guess you could say, are still a bit high, but they're not as bad. I mean, we could get a couple of Mary Pickfords here, Sparrows and Little Annie Rooney on either side of $200, again in 1982 dollars. But yeah, 16 millimeter was not cheap in general. So really, these prices aren't too bad at all. Now, Blackhawk did tend to run some articles in their stuff, but by this point, it seemed to be a bunch of existing stuff. And in this case, I swear they just randomly grabbed this one. But yeah, we've got an interview, I guess you could say, with John Travolta and Lily Tomlin, but they don't list that here, touting their new movie, Moment by Moment, which is a fairly infamous movie. But the thing is, Moment by Moment would have been about 4 years old by the time this hit the streets. So yeah, some sort of strange filler, I guess. Yeah, actually, I'm pretty sure Moment by Moment had passed into infamy by then, or maybe it was just somebody's little swipe at that movie at Blackhawk. Okay, we do actually have a little bit of an electronics section this time, and I can only imagine the reason that Blackhawk went with the CED video disc format is because they just seem to have a thing with RCA. They're not selling any Betamax VCRs in here, certainly. But anyway, yes, look at this price. We'll say 300 bucks there. But yeah, there you go. I think that is the flagship CED player there, the old SFT 100, which is just a very low-end mono unit. Some of the later ones had direct drive and more automated loading and that sort of thing. But yeah, this is where it's still mono audio. You're throwing the caddy in the machine. You have to pull this little switch and then yank the caddy back out. It doesn't do a lot of the loading for you. And yeah, it seems like even though this is only the spring of 82, these only got released in the spring of 81. It seems like they're already trying to clear these suckers out. But yeah, there would have been a stereo model fairly early on and certainly later on. Otherwise, yeah, we're running with the whole RCA Select-O-Vision thing here. We got one of their VHS decks and a perfectly decent looking one as far as the features go, it seems. There wasn't that much in terms of stereo for these quite yet. It was real close though. But yeah, still a little shy of $1,000 there. Otherwise, a couple of pretty nice looking Super 8 sound projectors there. And I might be misreading this, but this might be one of the stereo ones, the UMIG S840D, but I'm not positive. But if it's 2-track, in theory, it could be stereo. Yeah, but if you were looking for a new projector, you needed to squirrel away around 350 bucks plus shipping plus tax. All right, we got the same kind of basic VCR maintenance stuff here, or just empty cases, blank tapes, a bulk eraser, but I did find this rather amusing. We have to give you a little care course for how to deal with the video cassettes. If you were already dealing with film, I think you can more than handle a video cassette. Now here's something that I was not aware of until I started looking through some of these catalogs, but For a while, Blackhawk had a little bit of a side hustle going here called the Blackhawk Film Exchange. And what you would do is you'd send in your old Blackhawk prints as long as you kept the receipt. And if they deemed it to be in good enough condition, they would give you a 50% credit on buying another print from Blackhawk. So, yeah, that's a thing. I'm not entirely sure what the business, math was behind that and what the motivation was. But I had to kind of look around, but I'll have to jump back a few pages. But they do later admit that, oh yes, yeah, we're selling used prints now, but you're going to have to get a separate catalog and so on. But yeah, a little side hustle they had going that I was blissfully unaware of. All right, bouncing back a little bit here, we got a couple of books on closeout. Film Collecting by Gerald McKee, which I have never seen before, but it's on my radar now, I guess. Yeah, closing that sucker out for a mere $3 by this point. And I had never heard of the Warner Brothers story prior to that, but yeah, that seemed to be on its way out for $12 there. And then totally unrelated, we got a couple of Harold Lloyd shorts, public domain ones, finally finding their way to videotape, and a little cheaper than the others. It seemed like everything we saw in that other magazine was $50, but this is only $40, rounded to the nearest dollar. Well, we got another little sale here, and this time it's 20% off Wheeler and Woolsey films. They got 3 of them, and I know exactly one person that's into Wheeler and Woolsey, and I've never been able to get into their stuff at all. But yeah, hey, 20% off as long as you can get there before April 30th, again, of 1982. All right, well, let's take a quick look at the back here. I'll do my best to blot out the person's name, although I'd be willing to bet very heavily that person is no longer with us. But yeah, here we go, the last closeout of standard 8mm film. So I think we can put the death date at 1982 for standard 8 film. And the prices are really not bad at all. In some cases, better than videotape. But yeah, they still had some of the copyrighted Harold Lloyd movies. We just mentioned him a moment ago. And then we've got D.W. Griffith shorts, and then all the way up to Birth of a Nation. Got some Rudolph Valentino action going on there, albeit abridged versions of these apparently. So, yep. I think we figured out the death date for 8mm. I'd say Super 8, certainly as far as Blackhawk went, was probably done by 85 or so. But yeah, we'll have to go through some more of these things some other time and see if we can't pinpoint that one. Anyway, that is going to be it for me today. I think I've talked more than enough here. I'll blab at you again soon.